All right, friends, I'm super excited for who we have back on the show today. I'm sitting here with my real life friend, Jena Dunay. Jena, welcome back to Girls Night.
I feel like I've been here a million times, but it's been a really long time since I've been back, and I'm just pumped to be here with you. So it's an honor always to be here.
Like, how have I let it go on so long? That, trust me when I tell you, that will not happen again. You guys, for those of you who haven't heard Jena's Girls Night episodes, we'll link to them. We talked a lot about singleness and dating, in particular, and because you have just a really beautiful story. And so we'll link to those. But today we are picking your brain. We also have a whole episode about how to figure out what's next in your career and take steps in that direction. But that's the vein that we're walking in today. For women who haven't met you yet, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and a fun fact about yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Jena Dunay, and I live in Nashville, which is how we met. I'm a mom of 2 kids. I am a wife, and I'm a business owner. So I run an HR services organization, which helps companies as they are navigating layoffs, helping those individuals find their next opportunities. We do some leadership development and some recruiting, but I've largely lived in this space of how do you help people figure out what their next career move is. And so we have a team of career strategists that help people figure out how to redo their resumes, how to redo their LinkedIn profiles, how to figure out what the heck I'm doing with my life. All those big career questions that we often have and weren't actually taught in college, we help people discern those.
Thank you. And everyone said, thank you.
Yes.
Tell us, okay, can you give us a fun fact?
Oh, fun
I can't
fact.
remember what your past ones were, but
I don't know either. Okay,
yeah.
So my fun fact right now is I used to sing in college. Actually, I sang for the majority of my life, and I actually got a vocal scholarship in college to sing, even though I wasn't going to a conservatory. So that's my fun fact. I can sing. I don't sing unless it's to my daughter and we're singing Part of Your World, The Little Mermaid. Mm-hmm. But I used to be a singer. So
I did not know this about you. That is so
most people
cool.
don't actually. Because I haven't really sang in over a decade. And so it was a past life. But anytime I go home, people are always like, are you still singing? I'm like, no, I live in Nashville where they're professionals. So it's hard to plug into any music scene. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, Nashville is a hard place to don't do karaoke in Nashville.
No,
I should tell
don't.
just everyone. Don't do karaoke in Nashville. Yeah, sit back. Enjoy everybody else, unless you are. But Jena, it is taking all of my self-control not to ask you to sing right now. But I love you, and so I will not do it. I will not do it.
Thank you for not doing that. Maybe off camera we'll do that, and I'll give you a little voice memo of my singing.
Ooh, I love it. Okay, so we're talking today about preparing your career for baby, because this is one of these things that we talk about a lot in my corner of the internet with the everything era, that you have all of these really important areas of your life that are sort of crescendoing and requiring big decisions all at the same time. And kind of the most incompatible sounds like it's impossible. It's just that they don't fit together very well.
Yeah.
With the kind of system that's in place for moms, especially in the US right now. So we'll say incompatible, but it's not impossible. But one of the most incompatible ones is your career and your motherhood journey, because right as you're starting to take off in your career, that's when your body says, hey, it is time to have kids. If you're going to have kids, this is the moment. And so you suddenly have these 2 really big parts of your life competing for time, and it's really difficult. And there's also, a ton of statistics that are bummers about, our earning potential and how that changes in this time, and how, this is kind of a moment when men and women's, earning, I guess, goes in a different direction. And so being a mom and having a career and having those 2 meet is hard. And so because you are such a just pro and fount of wisdom when it comes to our careers, I wanted to ask you all about this.
Yeah.
So not to set you up on a pedestal for this conversation or
Well,
anything.
I think it's a really important conversation, and one that I don't feel like a lot of people talked about, because I came from, my mother was a stay-at-home mom. And so I didn't really have a model necessarily in my mom of what that looked like. Most of my friends' moms were stay-at-home moms, which is a great path for some people. But I knew early on for me, it was not going to be a path for me. I knew that I wanted to have a career. I felt called to have a career, but I also really felt called to be a mom. And so to your point, there are some competing conflicts, that there's some internal conflict that happens for women during this season. I think some of it we self-inflict. Some of it we think we need to have a lot of conflict on. And I think there's also like this whole support layer that we can talk about too, of like, how do you get more support so that you can have a career and then also at the same time be a really great mom? I don't think that they are mutually exclusive, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so tell us, like, for our purposes today, the woman that we're talking about is deep in a career that she loves.
Yeah.
If for that woman, as she's thinking about, okay, I want to start trying to have kids, I want to start trying to get pregnant, like this is what's next for me and my family, what should she be doing before she gets pregnant to prepare her career for like this kind of beautiful disruption?
Yeah, beautiful. I love how you say that. Beautiful disruption. That's exactly what it is. Couple of things. So I think, typically if I feel like in this day and age, people are usually in their late 20s, early 30s to almost 40 nowadays when people are kind of getting pregnant. And what's interesting about this whole season, the everything era that you're talking about, is, in your early 20s, you graduate from college and you've done the whole school thing. You went to elementary school, then you went to middle school, then you went to high school, then you went to college, and then you have your first job. And then it's like the wild, wild west. Like the options are endless and it's really overwhelming. So by the time that we get to the point where we're potentially having children, again, in that maybe late 20s, it's typical right now, late 20s to late 30s, we maybe haven't taken a pause to say, what do I actually want out of my career? What am I good at? What do I value? What's important to me? And what do I want to double down on in this next season? So I would actually say that as you're thinking about motherhood, thinking about your values first, your career values is the first thing to be doing. What is most important to you? I can tell you for myself, when I was becoming a mom, I knew that for me, flexibility was the most important thing for my work. I needed to be in a place, whether I was working for somebody else or working for myself, that flexibility was the absolute top priority for me. And it's what I valued in my career. That was like my non-negotiable. So I think for some people, it might be security. Like, I actually just need a stable job. Jenna, you're crazy for going out on your own, right? You're crazy for having your own business. I need stability. That's important to me. Or I need to have like an opportunity where I rise through the ranks in an organization. It's different for every single woman. So getting really crystal clear on what you value, what's important to you in your career, and what you want your career to look like 10 years from now is like the very first step before you even start thinking about when am I going to have a kid, right? And I think that reframe and pause allows you to get clear around what is the next step for you in your career. Does that make sense?
Yes, because I've talked with so many women, so many of my friends that are, have a baby in one hand and their career in another hand, and they don't actually love their career, which makes everything so much more complicated, or they don't love where they are in their career, or they don't know what's next. And we never know completely what's next. Not to say you have to have like a etched in stone 10-year plan, but
which you won't, by the way. You won't have a 10-year etched in stone plan. It never works out that way. If you expect that, you'll be disappointed all the time.
Yes, 100%. But if like, this is the direction I'm walking in, then that filters out so many other decisions and options along the way. And it helps you like make decisions along the way. I think that that's just really, really fantastic advice. I think for me too, it was flexibility. And that was something that I was thinking about, really early on in my career, partially for motherhood, but also just for life and lifestyle and travel and all these things. I just wanted to be able to run my own show. I wanted to call my own shots, even though I knew that would bring less stability with it. And it
I
has
totally,
in different seasons.
exactly. And I think that for me, so I think this might be helpful context for folks to understand of my backstory of even just becoming a mom in my own career. So I worked in corporate for the first 5-6 years of my career. I worked for big organizations. And then I went out on my own and had my own coaching business, which is why you and I got connected originally. And I did that until about 2021 when I got recruited to be the chief learning officer for an organization here in Nashville. And at that time, we were thinking about having children, and I loved the idea of having a paid maternity leave because I didn't know how I was going to do that with my job that I had and the business that I had built and kind of the structure I had built it with. It was not really feasible for me to take a maternity leave for that first child. And so I did go in with that planned intention, knowing probably that I wasn't going to be there forever because I am an entrepreneur at heart, because the flexibility piece I knew wasn't going to be there at that organization. And I worked there for about 2.5 years. I had my daughter there. I got maternity leave there. It was honestly the best thing ever for my family. And then also about, I don't know, 2.5 years later, it got to a point where like, hey, this actually wasn't a good fit for me because the values had changed once my daughter came. And I realized that I wanted to be around more. I wanted to be able to pick her up from childcare. I didn't want her to be, for me personally, did not want her to be there from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. And that was not congruent with the organization that I was at. And it's not their fault. But I knew that in order to reach my career goals and to also be very present for my kids, I then had to make another pivot. So I've since then had another child. This time, maternity leave was on me, which AKA meant I didn't have maternity leave because of where I was in my business. And so I think what we have to do as women that are preparing is to, one, understand where we are and what season, what's most important to us, and then pivot if it's not working. And that's okay too. And you aren't going to totally screw up your career if you have to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think that I love that. I love your story because the fact that it shifts and changes in different seasons makes total sense. And sometimes, like, depending on where we're sitting right now, we may think, okay, working for myself would offer tons of flexibility. That's not always the truth. Or that isn't always the best thing for your family. So you're like, I'm going to go get a normal job because that's going to offer our family the most support. But then that changed. And so that's just a really great reminder. If we know that we're going to start to have kids soonish, should we start pulling back in our career or making different decisions like before baby arrives in preparation? What does that look like?
I think that's a personal choice. My initial gut reaction is, why are we pulling back? Like, what's the reason for us pulling back? Are we pulling back because we're scared about capacity? Are we pulling back? We're like pulling back before we need to pull back kind of situation. And I almost want to encourage women to lean in and own the season that they're in. And until you need to change, you shouldn't change is kind of my thought process around it. Like, there's no reason to pull back unless you feel very strongly you want to. Like, if you're feeling like, wow, once this baby comes, I want to step away from my career, that's okay too. I feel like sometimes in this world, women get pressured to, they have to be like an all-in career woman to be like, I don't know, a modern female in the world. But like, it's also okay if you want to be a stay-at-home mom. Like, that is cool too. Just owning what your own story is. So I would say be very clear about why you be wanting to pull back. But generally speaking, don't pull back until you need to pull back. There's just no need for it. I don't give an employer a reason to ask why you're pulling back into. I just don't see any reason to do that.
Yeah. One thing that was really true for us is that it took us a long time to get pregnant.
Right.
And so I am glad that I didn't like put my career on hold being like, well, I'll have a baby next week, because I definitely did not have a baby next week. It took a really long time and you just don't know.
Right.
And we could be missing out on valuable years to do one thing, whether that's work or travel or, whatever the thing is that you're like, oh, maybe I should pull back on this. It's like, you really don't know when the next thing is going to start. And so I love that. Don't make a change until it's time to make a change.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, when you're thinking about, to your point, like, okay, I'm thinking about getting pregnant. Well, that baby still has to like, incubate in there for quite some time. So you have a long runway. Now, do I think you should be mentally preparing yourself, trying to be thinking about what you want out of your life? For sure. But I don't think we should be pulling back on our career until we absolutely need to be pulling back or we feel very called to.
Yeah. Is there, can you give us just like a little snippet of I think some of us have experienced this really tangibly. Some of us have just sort of heard rumors. I feel like I'm a little bit more in the rumors camp. I haven't had a traditional job in a long time. Having a baby or getting pregnant or even like the hint of maybe she will have a baby at some point can be a career liability. That's the sort of the rumor that I've heard. Is that true? And like, if so, how do we mitigate that?
Yeah, I think for maybe some organizations it can be true. I think it's generally speaking, I have found that it's not a career liability unless you make it one. So here's what I mean by that. It kind of goes back to your question around like, should I pull back in my career? I find that most women that I talk to that are pregnant, most of their organizations are excited about them being pregnant. Most of their organizations are celebrating that. I feel like we are living in a different era where maybe like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even it might have been a different story. But I found just with candidates that I talked to that most organizations are really excited. Like I'll give you an example for my organization that I was at most recently. One of the reasons why I joined, and this is an area where I think where our career planning can come into place, is if we're thinking about having a baby and we're even searching for a job, finding an organization that is pro mothers. Finding an organization that is pro-mother should be something that we are looking for. So when I was going through the interview process, I was asking questions to figure out what was their maternity leave benefits, how did they approach, moms? And they actually were very forthcoming, even before I was even asking about it, telling me about how somebody on their team told them in their first round interview, hey, I just found out I was pregnant today, which I would not advise people to do in a first round interview. But she told them, hey, I'm pregnant. I just found out I'm pregnant. I want you to know that before you hire me. And they're like, we would love to hire you still. And the fact that they told me about that told me that I wanted to work for this organization. And just how they spoke about family. It came from the top. The CEO had 4 children and was so like pro family that for me, it made sense for me to go and work for that organization. So does it happen? I'm sure we could find stories. Do I see it happen all the time? Honestly, not really anymore. And so I feel like it's a fear that we can create for ourselves like this mindset block that is going to totally ruin our trajectory of our career, which in actuality for myself, I feel like having children has totally exponentially increased the possibilities for me. My time is limited, but because my time is limited, I'm so much more focused on what I'm trying to accomplish than when I was single. Because I had what was I doing with my time, Stephanie? I have no idea what I was doing with my time.
No,
just throwing it away. So I think to some degree, if you look for it, you'll find it, is kind of my thought process around it. But I don't think it's as prevalent as people have rumored it to be, in full transparency.
Okay. Oh, well, that is so good to hear. And, I'm thinking about it like dating, which I think finding a job and dating are like have a lot of overlap. But yeah, you're looking for someone, not only are you looking to be the right person for someone, you're looking for someone who's the right person for you, the right fit for you.
Yeah.
And like, I think anyone who has been a mom or has met a mom knows that there is no one in the world that gets stuff done like a mom.
Yeah.
Like there is no better training for like dominating the world than motherhood. And so if a company doesn't know that, if a company thinks that like doesn't understand motherhood or how like what an incredible thing it is, then it's like, well, okay, but you're probably not a fit for me. If I'm going to have to downplay this thing that's actually a giant strength for me, then like, why would I want to work for you? And there are people I've heard, I've met different people along the way, especially recently, that are hiring specifically moms. Like, their hiring model is if you need something that's sort of a limited time and offers you a lot of flexibility, but you can get just amazing things done in that time. Yeah. This is for you. And like, that's the definition of moms.
I think it matters who you are, what types of organizations you're going after. I think that's the most important thing to focus on, of like, what organization, like what are my values? And then finding organizations that you want to be a part of and then thinking about the job function. Most people think about the job function when really they need to be thinking about the organization, the leaders that they are going to work for if you're going to work for somebody else. Because that's going to be a great indicator of, is this a good place to work? Is this going to be a place where it's going to stunt my growth if I have a child? Or is it going to, or people are going to celebrate that, right? I mean, there's organizations out there like my sister right now, she has 6 months of maternity leave. She works for a tech company. I have another friend who had 6 months of maternity. Like that's a very generous policy in the US. And so I would recommend that if you are at an organization right now where you're like, actually, they don't celebrate moms, this is not probably a good place for me if I'm thinking about having children. Doing your research and finding organizations that really celebrate motherhood and celebrate parenthood in general, those are going to be great places for that. You can feel a little bit more confident that it's not going to stifle your career long term.
Yeah, I love that. And I hope that every company catches up and goes, wow, I'm missing out on some of the brightest people in the world because I won't let them go pick up their kid when they're sick. Like, yes. why would you do that?
Totally.
So and this is totally a different world for me because I didn't do this in a corporate setting, but when you are in your career and you're thinking, okay, I just found out I'm pregnant or I'm trying to get pregnant right now. What are women entitled to when it comes to maternity leave? And how do we figure that out?
Yeah, it's so complicated. It shouldn't be so complicated. But and to be honest, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not an HR expert. But what I would recommend doing is I can have questions that you need to be asking. So there's different state requirements. There's different, I live in Tennessee. My best friend lives in California. California has totally different rules and laws than Tennessee does. And so it'd be hard for me to say exactly what, because there's going to be so many different types of people listening. So figure out what your state laws are. FMLA is a part of that. Again, I am not an expert on that, but doing some research on FMLA and then asking your HR leader or the organization's leader about what are the maternity leave benefits, what needs to happen when I go on maternity leave, what's paid and what's unpaid. So I have a friend who's on maternity leave right now. She works for a really large organization. They offer 3 months of paid leave, but up to 6 months of unpaid leave, meaning, and so that's where it gets a little bit complicated, but asking the questions up front is going to help you not feel surprised in the process. Asking, when do I have to file paperwork? What is afforded to me? Just asking those questions is going to make you feel a lot more confident when you get to the point where you're actually going through the process of giving birth. And so knowing that before you give birth is really important because if you're trying to figure that out postpartum, that's not ideal. I did that, which was really unwise. And so I always tell people, and I'm happy to provide you with some questions that people should be asking their HR leaders that we can even include in show notes.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I'm glad to hear that it's complicated because that makes me feel less why don't I understand this?
It's complicated. Yeah. It just, again, it's the federal level, the state level. Every company offers different things. It can get a little bit hairy. And so it's really important to ask the questions to your HR leaders or to the leaders at your organization if you don't have an HR department to get more clarity around it.
Can you explain some of the terms to us? What does it mean to be on maternity leave? You still have your job. Are you doing your job? Paid versus unpaid? I guess define maternity leave for us because I think that some of us don't totally know what is included in it.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it comes down to when I think of maternity leave, again, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not an HR expert. But when I think of maternity leave, I think of paid time off to be with my baby. So that's what most people are thinking about when they're thinking about maternity leave. And so, back in the day, my mom, it was, she got 6 weeks, which is insane, actually, if you think about that. 6 weeks of paid maternity leave is nothing for somebody, but some organizations offer that. So it's understanding what's being paid and what's unpaid. That's where I would kind of focus in for yourself. Again, I'm not an expert on all of the legalese or any of that, but I would definitely focus on what does it mean to be paid? What does paid maternity leave look like? And then what does unpaid maternity leave look like? How much time can you take with your baby?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and 6 weeks sounds like a lot of time to not be working but still get paid. Like, if you wanna give me that for vacation, fantastic, I would love that.
Yeah.
But, like, a 6-week-old baby is so small.
Tiny. So
So
small.
small.
Yeah. Honestly, a
It's
3-month-old
just
baby
so
is so
early.
small. 3-month-old baby is so small, right? So, I mean, I do think that you're seeing a lot of more organizations that are moving to the 6-month model because I think that it's more common also abroad. Like there's some countries abroad that offer a year for you to be with your baby, which
Yeah.
like I'm not for more government intervention, but I'm definitely for governments paying for that because I think it's only going to help our family structures, you know. But and so our
Yeah.
country just doesn't have those in place, which quite frankly they should.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's why it comes down to your employer. And so
Exactly.
with paid leave, it's true, right, that sometimes, like, some of the options are for paid, it's like sometimes you get your full salary, so
Hmm.
you don't have to come to work and you still get your full salary. That's fantastic. Sometimes it's like 80%, it's like less, right? Or
Yeah.
like you get paid, but maybe not the full amount, or you get paid the full amount for a little while, not the full amount for a little while. And then unpaid is you don't have to come to work for this long and we're not going to fire you in the process.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. You're right on all
You
accounts.
don't get
It's
like
why
you
it's
don't get paid.
complicated. That's
Okay.
why it's
Okay.
super complicated
Okay.
because there are moments where like yes, fully paid versus kind of paid versus not paid, but you won't lose your job. So again, there's different federal and state laws around how long a company can hold your job basically and what their requirements are as a result of that. And so yeah, it is complicated, but again, it comes down to your organization's level, and that's why you need to ask a lot of questions.
Okay. Okay. That's really good. Tell me, like, when we have you mentioned maybe in the very first interview, don't say, "Hey, I'm pregnant."
Yeah.
When should we tell our employer that we're pregnant? And do you have any tips for like how we go about that?
Totally. I love this question. And again, I think it always goes down to personal preference, but my rule of thumb and my general suggestion is two different things. So there's one, if you're in an organization already, when do you tell? And then if you're job searching, when do you tell? Right. So they're two totally different things. So I would recommend, again, this is just my recommendation. You have to do what's right for you and what you feel right from your conscience perspective. But I would wait if you're in the job search process. I would not recommend telling somebody in the very first interview. I would recommend telling somebody before you give an offer. So in kind of a last round interview. And the reason why is, some people have a school of thought like you don't need to tell them. I actually disagree. I think from an integrity standpoint, again, if you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, you want to know some of the skeletons in their closet. They want to know some of the skeletons in your closet, right? So I think not that having a child is a skeleton, but it is impactful to why they're hiring for the role, right? So they're hiring for the role for somebody to come in and fill that role to be able to take work off somebody's plate or to fulfill a certain goal. So it is important that you be transparent and keep your side of the road clean, so to speak, and tell them, hey, I just want to let you know I am pregnant. I wanted to disclose that. And then be very clear about this is when this is my due date. I wanted to be honest about that. And if someone doesn't hire you because of that, one, there's some legal ramifications in there. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I would look into that if you don't get hired, if you feel like that's the reason why you don't get hired. But two, if they don't hire you, you don't want to work for them anyways. So there's like kind of like the both and there. So on the job search front, I would recommend not the first interview, but if you're going farther along in the process towards the end, I would definitely disclose that. And then if you're at an organization, again, whatever you feel comfortable with, most people wait till after the first trimester in case of, typically if a miscarriage is going to happen, it's going to happen in the first trimester. And so most people kind of wait until they're about 6 months or until they start showing. I've had some folks where it's their second or third kid and they're like, I need to tell somebody because it's very clear that I'm pregnant because I'm showing a little bit earlier. For me, I told my employer right around probably 4 months, where I was pretty clear that I was probably going to have a viable pregnancy and I started to show a little bit. And so again, I think it really comes down to your own preference and seeing how people respond to it will give you a great indication of what type of organization that you're a part of. I know for me, when I told my leaders that I was pregnant, they were so thrilled for me. And I was like, I'm clearly a part of an organization that really values family. I've had some clients where that has not been their reaction. And that's really unfortunate, but it tells you a lot about the organization that you're a part of if they're not celebrating that.
Yeah. I feel like I want to pause on this for a second because I don't know that maybe this just makes sense to everybody, but maybe also we haven't like spent a lot of time thinking through it about why an organization would be like not excited that you're pregnant. And you touched on it that when someone's hiring for a position, like if we put ourselves in the seat of the owner of a business, you have a problem. You need someone to come in and solve it. You're going to pay them money to like come help you with this thing. And you really need that help. If that person came in and you hired them thinking, oh gosh, like this is going to make everything so much easier. And then they drop it on you. Okay, yes, I'm here, but I'm actually not going to be here for like 3 to 6 months.
Yes.
You're like, oh, okay. So then that means that one, I still have to pay you but you're not going to be helping me with this thing. Like that's a hit to, and it's especially a bummer when it's an unexpected one for a company. It like in the short term.
Yeah.
In the longer term, a company should be like, hey, this person is brilliant. I'd love for them to be part of my team. We can hold off for 3 to 6 months and support them during this transition, knowing that they're going to be a huge asset to us long term. But that's kind of what we're talking about is as a company, you're paying someone to be there who's not there. And that's like, from a company's perspective, like that is really hard. You have a job that needs to be done.
Yeah.
You need someone to do it. And so that's kind of that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I think people need to think about that too, of like, obviously you made it that's a great example, right? Like an organization is looking to hire somebody to solve a problem and they're not just hiring for their health. Sometimes we like think that like, oh, companies are just hiring for their health. No, they're hiring to solve a problem. We could get into, why people in the interview process actually don't do a good job interviewing is because they forget that piece of the puzzle, which is a totally different probably conversation we could have. But I think in this, when we're talking about, maternity leave and just motherhood in general, it can be a hit to especially a smaller organization. For larger organizations, they're kind of used to that. But for a smaller organization, like every person matters. And it could be, they want to bring on somebody, they want to see your brilliance, but also they need this to be filled. And now it kind of messes up their workflow planning or their workforce planning. And so we just have to have that transparency up front to let them know what they're getting themselves into, just like we hope they'll let us know what we're getting ourselves into as well.
Yeah. Yeah. What advice do you have for us while we're on maternity leave? Like how much should we expect to be talking to our employers? How much, like, where do we draw boundaries? Where are we allowed to draw boundaries? Like, it does feel weird to like walk away from our career for a little while and be like, I'm just not answering my email. Like, are you allowed to not answer your email?
I completely shut off all my email. I knew that this was a very precious time that I would never get back. And an email is always going to be there. I really shut off. When I had paid maternity leave, I took full advantage of that. And I would recommend every mom to take full advantage of that. If you have paid maternity leave, you should not be checking in on your email. And if you want to, by all means, do it. But like, you should not feel this impulsive need to be checking your email to make sure everything's going okay. If anything, you should use it as practice time to set those boundaries and get kind of in the mode. So I would say for you, just enjoy the time. It's a big, especially if it's your first, it's a big transition to go from no children to children, or even it's 1 to 2. That's even a big transition as well. I just did that. And so enjoy the time, be with that precious baby. You're never going to get that back. And let your career be on quote unquote pause. It is okay. And it's actually very healthy for you to be focused on your child and not being worried about what's going on at work. I definitely recommend shutting off all email and just giving yourself space. I've actually heard a lot of moms say they were surprised at how much they enjoyed maternity leave, that they enjoyed being able to shut everything down and just be present with their family, present and have like one job. They were focused on their new baby and that was their job. And so I think that attitude and that perspective is really healthy. I would say that as you're about to segue back into work, so you're still on maternity leave, but it's maybe in the next 2 weeks, you might want to, just for your own sanity, check in with your email, check in with your boss, see how you're doing. I know that a lot of organizations, about like maybe 2 to 3 weeks prior to somebody coming back in, will have a meeting with you. Like your boss might have a meeting with you to say like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What are you thinking? Because that's oftentimes when maybe a mother will feel like, I don't want to go back to this job, or maybe I need to stay longer, or I'm so excited to come back. Like whatever your answer is, give yourself that time to marinate and be with your child, be with your family. And then when you feel comfortable to dip your toes back in, but allow yourself the space because it's hard. It's hard transition. And I feel like sometimes it's easy to jump back into work when really, if we're given the opportunity to have the space, take advantage of it.
Yeah. Again, I feel like my questions are all like, is this allowed?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm like in high school. Like, am I allowed to do this? Is that something you're allowed to do? Like, as you reach the end of your maternity leave, say it's 3 months and you go, wow, I really don't want to go back, or
Yeah.
I want to stay out longer. Like, I mean, I guess the staying longer you would know, because that's one of the questions that you should ask ahead of time is like, is there an unpaid option that you can opt into at some point? But like, are you allowed to, at the end of your maternity leave, after this company has just paid you for however many months of not working, to say like, I'm not coming back?
Absolutely. You can absolutely do that. However, again, every organization's a little bit different. So I had a friend who worked for a large organization. She got 6 months paid maternity leave. Part of the caveat was you had to come back for 6 months after that in order to take advantage of that 6-month maternity leave, or you had to like pay back the organization. So again, it comes down to the organization, that level of the organization, and asking those questions ahead of time to figure out what is allowed and what's not allowed. But yes, I mean, we see it happen all the time that moms get to the point where like, I'm just not coming back. And, some people feel bad about that, like taking advantage of that. I kind of am of the mindset of like, you've got to do what's right for you and your family. Be respectful in your departure if you do decide to do that. Try not to burn any bridges. But it's a hard decision and people understand that as well. And so just know what your organization's policies are so you're not in a pickle. But don't. If you have to do, at the end of the day, a company will only be as loyal to you as what makes financial sense for them. And so it is okay for you to have that same perspective as well. And we often forget that. Again, I'm not saying to burn bridges. I'm not saying to be rude. I'm not saying to be unkind and to really, give it to somebody. I'm saying you need to watch out for your family because a company is watching out for themselves as well.
Oof, that is such good advice. That is such good advice. Tell me, in terms of like, as we're looking, you are such a like master strategist at career planning. Like truly, it's incredible. And so I feel like you have this way of zooming back from the path and going, okay, if you go here, or if you position yourself a little bit like this, or, to move forward. As we're looking at motherhood, whether it's our first baby or we're saying, I want to have 2 or 3 at some point, what are some things that we can do in our careers overall to position ourselves for like success and growth?
Yeah, you've got to figure out what success means to you. So I know we've kind of talked about that a couple of times, like go back to your values, but defining what success means to you looks different than what it means to me, looks different to what it means to my friend down the street, right? And I think it's different for different seasons. And to your point earlier, you said like the plan that's etched in stone, don't have anything etched in stone. Have everything etched in pencil that can easily be erased and rewritten. And we're not writing with a Sharpie marker. We're writing with a pencil, especially during these years because things happen. There's a lot of things that can happen with kids. You and I both know, like stuff happens with kids that changes trajectories, that changes our priorities, changes how we feel about things. I've had some women who, go on maternity leave and they're like, I'm definitely coming back. And then by the end of the maternity leave, like, I'm definitely not coming back. Like a lot of things can happen. So give yourself the freedom and the space to redefine what success means to you, and success from a holistic standpoint. So not just to think about it from your professional life, but to think about it from your personal life. Like at the end of your quote unquote retirement, whether that is retiring from, never retire from motherhood, but at the end of your quote unquote retirement, like what do you want people to say about you? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to have done in your career? And proactively thinking about that is going to be really important. But what I would also say, I can give you an example of a friend of mine where in a certain season, she had a 2 under 2. And she told her they wanted to promote her actually at her workplace. And she promoted her to a manager where she'd have like responsibility for leading some people. And she said no during that season. And that actually was success to her. She said, no, I'm not interested. I'm interested in being an individual contributor, not a leader of people. I just don't want that. Fast forward 3 years later, she now has, her children are 6 or 7 and 5. It's a different season of life. And she took on that more leadership role and has been able to still grow her career professionally, even in that interim time period. So it's figuring out what you can handle, what you want in that season, and knowing that you can change and grow in the future as well. And so I think she's a great example of like how we can look at growth. If growth means promotion for some of us, if growth means salary growth, if growth just means I'm trying to learn and be like a sponge during this season, that's okay too. But you have to define what success means to you and then go after the thing. For me personally, when I was looking at my career, I have a really audacious goal. It's an absurd goal, but I have a goal to sell my company in 10 years from now for a certain amount of money that I won't say out loud. That's a goal for me. But also a goal for me is I want to be present for my children. And I wasn't going to be able to do both of those things, obviously working for somebody else. I was not going to be able to build the financial wealth that I wanted for my family working for somebody else. And I wasn't going to be able to pick up my kid respectfully, even though my employer was such a family-friendly organization. They loved families. It was all about families. My role was about families in that capacity. And even still, I couldn't pick up my kid at 3:30 because that just wasn't fair to everybody else, right? Like that, it just in their structure of their organization, that just didn't work. I respected that, but I respectfully declined to be a part of that organization because I had a different priority. And so I think again, for you in your different season, you've got to figure out what makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. It's so good. And I love ridiculous, audacious goals. I love that.
And again, it's not everybody. Everybody has a different goal of what success looks like to them and why they are doing what they're doing. And for me, I got really clear about what I wanted, what we wanted for our family, what we wanted our lifestyle to look like. For me, like even thinking about raising my children 5 years from now, my daughter will be 7 years old. I would love to take her to a business meeting with me so she can learn real time what it looks like to operate in the business world that I think is going to be way more valuable than college. Again, a different subject that we could talk about. But like, I want to bring her along to that. I wouldn't be able to do that if I worked for somebody else. Again, respectfully, that's not really what I'm there for, right? But I can make the rules. And that autonomy and that independence was way more important to me than the stability and the structure of like, if I'm here for this many years, I get this raise, and then eventually could potentially become partner and buy in, and maybe my wealth could grow that way. I was not interested in that slow trajectory. I was interested in this over here where I could build something that was my own. Again, it's what you have to figure out is right for you and your family and your ecosystem.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Jena, anything else? Anything I missed? Anything that you're like, every woman needs to know this, or don't forget this, or just I want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is give yourself grace during this season. It's hard. And it's really can be confusing about what you want, what you prioritize, what the world tells you is important. And you have to get really quiet in your own family, in your own situation, in your own goals, and understand what you want and what you want your life to look like, and knowing that you have control over that. And you can have a say in what your career looks like. There are so many more possibilities for women nowadays than there were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago. And so take advantage of the season of the world that we're in and figure out what works best for you, and don't apologize to anybody.
That's so good. Jena, thanks so much for coming back to Girls Night. You must come back soon.
I will come back soon. We're going to make it happen.